I grinned as I delivered my usual line to the camera, a phrase I toss out regularly, though truthfully, I never expect anyone to act on it. This time, though, something seemed off. Maybe it was the gentle rain pattering against the window or the way the morning light seeped through heavy clouds, painting long, idle shadows across the floor. The day felt like the start of something surprising, something beyond my normal routine. It had been ages since I'd had a student. Too many years, if I'm honest. After years of teaching high school English, I'd stepped back to focus on writing and occasional private tutoring. It wasn't flashy work, but it kept my mind sharp, and I'd come to cherish the quiet, almost personal vibe of one-on-one lessons. Today, though, stood out. I had a new student named Aaron, and when he appeared at my doorstep, I wasn't sure what to expect. His name came from a former colleague's recommendation. She'd said he was grappling with his studies but eager to improve, which piqued my interest. I admire determination, maybe because I recognize a bit of it in myself, tucked beneath years of life's ups and downs. I recall opening the door that afternoon, prepared to meet a stranger, likely a young man in his late 20s or early 30s. What I didn't expect was the way my pulse quickened when I saw him. There was a quiet fire in his eyes, a depth that made me feel exposed, as if he saw more of me than I was ready to share. It wasn't just my mind playing tricks. I could tell by the brief pause before he offered his hand. "Aaron," he said, his voice gentle yet assured. "Sorry I'm early, didn't want to make you wait." I ushered him inside, sensing an odd flutter I couldn't pinpoint. "No worries," I said. "I'm just wrapping up some work, but we'll start soon." We chatted lightly as I guided him to the small desk near the window. I noticed his eyes scanning the room, taking in the shelves packed with worn novels, the messy desk, and the few personal trinkets scattered about. It wasn't much, just a snug little nook I'd carved out after years of teaching. I watched him settle into the chair opposite me, his posture stiff, like he wasn't sure how to act in such close quarters with someone new. Maybe it was the setting, or maybe it was the personal nature of seeking to grow his knowledge. I sensed that same raw openness in the air between us, but wasn't sure how to handle it. So I tried to ease the moment. "What's brought you here? What do you want to focus on?" His eyes flicked up, and for a second I caught a hint of something deeper. Doubt, perhaps, but he quickly hid it. "I struggle with understanding what I read," Aaron said. "I always feel like I'm missing the point, like there's a piece of the story I can't grasp." I nodded, relating to his words. It wasn't rare for students to feel this way, but it had been a while since I'd heard such candid honesty. Maybe that's why I liked him right away. His openness, his readiness to admit he didn't have all the answers. That was the first spark of connection. "We can definitely tackle that," I said, offering a reassuring smile. "Let's start small. What's a book you've read recently that you didn't fully understand?" He leaned back, his fingers idly drumming on the chair's armrest. "I tried The Great Gatsby last year. Everyone calls it a classic, but I couldn't finish it. It just didn't click." "The Great Gatsby," I said, having taught it countless times. It always stirred debates. Some students adored it. Others couldn't stand it. The trick was spotting the hollowness beneath the Jazz Age's sparkle. It wasn't just about Gatsby's fixation on Daisy. It was about the empty promises of the American dream, about longing, disappointment, and characters blind to their reality. "I get why it's tough," I said, tapping my fingers on the desk. "There's a lot happening in that book, both obvious and hidden, but once you dive into the themes and what drives the characters, it starts to come together. It's not about love, not the kind most people imagine. It's about obsession and chasing ideals we can never truly reach." His eyes lit up as I spoke, and I could see him starting to open up, viewing the story differently. "I never saw it like that," he said, his voice softer, more thoughtful. "I've always treated books like riddles I'm supposed to crack, but I never know what the pieces mean." I leaned in, the warmth of the moment forging a quiet bond. "Books aren't just riddles," I said. "They're doorways to understanding the world and ourselves. When you stop trying to solve them and start feeling them, everything shifts." For a long moment, silence hung between us. Not uneasy, just a calm, shared pause that seemed to linger. It felt like we were both absorbing something, connecting beyond words. Then, as if by mutual understanding, we both stood, ready to dive into the work. But something had changed, something subtle yet strong, leaving me with a curious sense of excitement. Whatever this was, this spark, it felt like it was only starting. The next few weeks flew by with steady progress. Each time Aaron came, he seemed a bit more at ease, more willing to explore the ideas I offered. It wasn't just about books anymore. We began discussing life, dreams, what made us feel alive, and what left us feeling lost. Our sessions became a space of gentle discovery, where words weren't just for analyzing, but for building bridges between two people just beginning to know each other. The weather had shifted since that first day, moving from spring's cool, gloomy drizzle to summer's bright, sticky warmth. I found myself looking forward to Aaron's visits with a nervous thrill I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't that I expected anything to happen, but our sessions had an undeniable pull. I was learning as much from him as he was from me, and I felt a quiet bond growing. On one especially warm afternoon, something changed. Aaron was unusually quiet, as if his thoughts were elsewhere. We started by discussing Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms, but I could tell something was off. His answers were short, distracted, his usual curiosity replaced by something heavier, unspoken. We'd moved to reading passages aloud when he stopped abruptly. "Can we talk about something else?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes avoiding mine. I wasn't sure what prompted this, but I nodded. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He paused, glancing out the window as if searching for words. "I don't know if I'm meant for this anymore, for anything," he said, shifting uncomfortably with the weight of his honesty. "Everything I've learned about life, what I'm supposed to do, it doesn't add up. I feel stuck, like I'm not where I'm meant to be." His words caught me off guard. I'd seen his drive, his eagerness to learn, but I hadn't realized the depth of his frustration. It was as if his pursuit of knowledge was a way to escape something deeper, more personal. "What do you mean?" I asked softly, setting the book aside. "What's weighing on you?" For a moment, he was silent, the room growing heavier, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Then, with a soft, bitter chuckle, Aaron spoke. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just not enough. I've spent years trying to figure it out, but I keep making the wrong moves. I've made choices I regret." His raw honesty hit me hard. I'd always been the teacher, the one with answers, offering guidance. But in that moment, I realized I was on the same shaky ground as Aaron, unsure, searching for meaning in a world that often felt confusing. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes," I said, leaning forward, hoping to offer comfort. "I've been there too. Regret's heavy, but it's also a way to learn who you are. Mistakes and choices shape us, but they don't decide who we become. We get to choose what's next." His eyes met mine, and I saw a spark. Maybe recognition, maybe the faintest hint of hope. "I want to believe that," he said quietly. "I just don't know how." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "You start by being gentle with yourself," I said. "You let go of thinking you need all the answers. You don't, and neither do I. But together, we can find the next step." It was a quiet moment, one that lingered long enough for us to feel its weight. It wasn't just about literature anymore, it was about life, a lesson we were teaching each other without even knowing. The weeks after Aaron's confession were transformative. Each session brought new insights, both in our work and in the quiet connection growing between us. I began to anticipate his visits with more than professional interest. There was something deeper now, almost magnetic, pulling me in. I couldn't ignore it. I was developing feelings for him. It wasn't planned or expected. I was nearly twice his age, and he was my student. My responsibility to guide, not to grow emotionally attached to. But he had a way of making me feel alive, reminding me life was more than surface level. Aaron saw me, truly saw me, in a way few others did, and I was starting to see him too. Not just as a student, but as someone with his own world of dreams, desires, doubts, and pain. One afternoon, after a long lesson, we sat on the couch, a comfortable silence between us. We just discussed Toni Morrison's Beloved, one of my favorite novels, and Aaron seemed deeply affected. He hadn't said much, but his wide eyes soaked in every word, every detail. "You really connected with that one, didn't you?" I said, breaking the quiet. He glanced at me, his expression softer than usual. "Yeah, I never thought about history like that. The way pain carries through generations, shaping who we are, it's powerful. I'm glad it spoke to you, I said, my heart unexpectedly racing. We sat there, the silence stretching, and then Aaron did something unexpected. So natural, yet so intimate, it stole my breath. He reached out, lightly brushing my hand. It wasn't a gesture I'd anticipated, not from him, not here. I'm glad I came to you, he said softly, his voice low. I don't know where I'd be without these lessons. You've helped me more than you know. His words sank into me, warm and heavy, and for a fleeting moment, I wondered if he sensed how much he meant to me. But before I could speak, he pulled his hand back, as if realizing what he'd done. The moment passed, but the tension lingered, thick in the air. I didn't know how to respond, didn't know what to do with the emotions swirling inside me. But one thing was clear. Whatever this was between us, it was real. It wasn't until a month later, on a warm evening, that I stood at my apartment door, watching Aaron leave after our last lesson of the week. It had been an emotional session, one I hadn't expected to end with a revelation. We discussed The Catcher in the Rye, but the talk had shifted to personal matters. Somewhere amid Salinger's pages, Aaron opened up again, this time about his family, his parents' expectations, and how he'd always felt inadequate. I hadn't realized it then, but he was letting me in, beyond academics, as if the walls he'd kept up were crumbling, inviting me closer. This time, I didn't pull back. I wanted to listen, to help. You've come so far, Aaron, I said, my voice heavy with feeling. You're not the same person who walked in here months ago. You've grown so much. He smiled softly, his eyes full of unspoken thoughts. There was something in his gaze I couldn't name, but it tugged at my heart. I don't know what I'd have done without you, he said, his voice quiet, raw. You've taught me more than how to read. You've shown me how to understand myself. I stood there, our eyes locked, and then, as if by instinct, I stepped closer, narrowing the space between us. He was so near I could feel his breath. Without thinking, I reached out, my hand grazing his arm. He didn't pull away, and in that moment, with the world beyond our small space fading, I knew that whatever came next, we had already changed each other in ways that could never be undone. I can still recall how the words lingered in the atmosphere when they first reached my ears. But what I'm about to share isn't a straightforward tale or a predictable existence. You've heard people say that life can transform in a moment. Well, it's true. Sometimes it's the tiniest instances that unravel all you believed you understood. I never imagined it would unfold this way. My name is Julia, and I'm 58 years old. I know what you're assuming. No, I'm not your typical empty nester or a stereotypical figure from a love story. I've navigated the highs and lows of marriage, raising children, and evolving into the person I am now. Like anyone, I had my habits. My husband, Michael, and I had been wed for over 3 decades. We met when we were young, too excited to discover what life held, yet unprepared for the path ahead. We crafted a fulfilling life together. 2 amazing kids, a house brimming with joy and a touch of disorder, and a quiet sense of satisfaction. I loved him deeply, without doubt, but life has a way of altering things in ways you never anticipate. The day Michael departed for his yearly fishing trip, I didn't think much of it. I was accustomed to him being gone for a few days, a chance for him to relax with old buddies and for me to savor some calm. We'd both come to value these short breaks. They allowed us to reclaim our individuality, to step back from the roles we'd embraced so fully over time. I was content, even a bit excited to have a few days to myself. But this story isn't about that. It's about what happened when Michael's closest friend, Alan, came by. Alan had been part of our lives since Michael and I were in our 20s. He was the one who brought us together, and we'd shared countless evenings playing games, eating together, and getting into mischief only lifelong friends can. Alan wasn't a frequent guest, but occasionally he'd stop by when Michael was away. It was normal for him to spend a couple of hours at the house, catching up, reminiscing, or helping with a small task. That day, when Alan knocked, I wasn't expecting him. It was mid-afternoon, the sunlight soft and golden, filtering through the trees outside. I'd just settled into my favorite chair with a book, the house peaceful in a way that felt cozy and serene. When I opened the door and saw Alan standing there, his broad frame filling the doorway, a strange flutter stirred in my chest. "Hey, Julia," he said with his familiar grin. He looked as he always did, Worn jeans, a casual shirt, his hair slightly messy as if he'd been running his fingers through it. Alan always had a rugged charm, his presence making the house feel more vibrant, even without Michael around. Alan, I replied, offering a smile. What brings you here? Just passing through, he said, his eyes briefly scanning the room. Thought I'd check if you needed anything. Michael's gone, and you might feel lonesome. I laughed. I don't get lonesome that easily. Good to know, he said, stepping inside. He was the type who never waited for a formal invite, always at ease, and I never minded. We sat at the kitchen table, chatting about the usual, how the weather was, how the kids were doing, how life was treating us. But something felt off this time. I couldn't pinpoint it, but a subtle tension hung between us. Something unspoken. Maybe it was Michael's absence, or perhaps the years had changed things. Alan wasn't just my husband's best friend anymore. He was something more. Not in a physical way, not yet, but in the way he looked at me. His gaze lingering, his voice softening when he spoke. I felt it too, but I didn't know how to handle it. We talked for hours, the sunlight fading outside. Alan had shed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and I noticed the veins in his arms, the muscles shifting as he moved. My gaze lingered a moment too long, and when I looked up, his eyes met mine, a shade darker than usual. It was odd. I felt a warmth spread through me, an unexpected pull, the kind you can't explain or know how to address. I tried to ignore it. I was married. I loved Michael. Alan was just a friend, wasn't he? Julia, Alan said, his voice quiet. Is everything all right? You seem different. I swallowed, unsure how to reply. The truth was, everything had changed. But how could I explain that? I'm fine, I said, but my voice wavered, almost a whisper. Alan watched me silently for a moment. Then, as if sensing my thoughts, he stood and walked to the window. The fading light caught his face, casting shadows that made him seem older, more exposed. You know, he said, his back to me. Sometimes I wonder what could have been if things had turned out differently for us. My heart skipped. His words lingered like a question I couldn't answer. There it was, the feeling I hadn't named. Before I could respond, he turned, his eyes searching mine, filled with something raw and honest. You and Michael, you're solid. I've always respected that. But sometimes life throws you something unexpected. I was speechless. What was happening? Why was he saying this? Why did I feel this shift inside me? I didn't know what would come next, but that afternoon, something between us had shifted. Something I didn't fully grasp, but knew would stay with me forever. After that day, things between Alan and me didn't change outwardly. Michael returned from his trip, and our daily routines resumed as if nothing had occurred. The kids called, we shared laughs over meals, and I slipped back into my role as wife and mother. But I couldn't shake the sense that something was different, a subtle shift I couldn't name. I found myself lost in thoughts I hadn't entertained in years. Alan didn't visit as often afterward, but when he did, I felt the weight between us. It wasn't in our words, those remained light, but in the silences, the fleeting moments when our eyes met and everything else faded. I wondered what would happen if I didn't hold back. One night, weeks later, I found the courage to face it. Michael had gone to bed early, exhausted from work. I stayed up reading, trying to escape the heaviness in my mind. The phone rang, startling me. It was Alan. Hey, Julia, you awake? His voice was casual, but there was an edge to it. Yeah, just reading, I said, keeping my tone steady. What's up? I was thinking of stopping by if you're alone, he said. My heart raced, though I couldn't say why. I'm alone, I replied, the words feeling strange, almost secretive. I wasn't hiding anything, but there was a weight to them. I'll be there soon, he said. When Alan arrived, there was no one to stop us from facing the tension that had been building. It wasn't just about attraction, though I'd be dishonest if I said those feelings weren't there. It was something deeper, something I hadn't fully understood until then. He walked in quietly, his jacket slung over his shoulder, and the room seemed to still. We didn't sit at the table this time. Alan took a seat on the couch and I joined him. The silence wasn't awkward, it was profound. He turned to me, his gaze steady. Julia, I can't stop thinking about that night, about what we said. My chest tightened, but I met his eyes. Alan, we both know what you mean. and I don't know what to make of it. You don't have to understand it, he said softly. I just need to know if you feel it too. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to admit the truth, that I felt this strange, familiar connection, something I'd longed for without realizing. But another part was tied to my life with Michael, to my duties as a wife and mother. I don't know, Alan, I said quietly. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel. His hand reached for mine, and I didn't pull away. We sat in the dim light, the weight of everything between us. He wasn't pushing, he was giving me space to feel it. That moment changed everything, not because we acted on it, but because we acknowledged it without fear. We didn't have to pursue it, but we could admit it, and that was enough. In the days that followed, things didn't return to normal. The quiet understanding between Alan and me lingered, always just beneath the surface. Michael remained unaware, his life consumed by work and family, while I struggled to keep things balanced. But balance felt impossible. I tried to suppress the feelings, to bury them where I thought they belonged. But every time Alan visited, every time he smiled in that way that stirred my heart, the truth was there, vivid and undeniable. It was both thrilling and frightening. It felt like a betrayal, yet also like a personal awakening. One evening, 2 weeks after that quiet moment, I was alone again. Michael had gone to bed early, worn out from a long week. I stood in the kitchen, gazing at the moonlight flooding the backyard, when a soft knock came at the door. I knew it was Alan before I opened it. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking tired but resolute. I've been thinking, he said, his voice low, and I don't want to complicate things for you. I'm not asking for a decision, Julia, but I need to know where you stand. I saw the worry in his eyes, the fear that we were on the edge of something neither of us was prepared for. I let him in, but I didn't know how to respond. I don't want to hurt you, Alan, I said, my voice barely audible. I never wanted this. I know, he said gently. But sometimes you can't control what you feel. Sometimes you have to be honest. The truth lingered between us, raw and real, but I couldn't let it guide me down an uncertain path. Michael is my husband, I said, the words almost a plea. I love him. I don't know what this means. Alan nodded, a sadness in his eyes. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I'm not asking you to choose, he said quietly, but I care about you in a way I can't explain. I care about you too, I admitted, my voice shaking. Then without another word, he stepped back, his hand brushing mine as he left. It wasn't closure, it was understanding, a moment of mutual respect. Life didn't return to normal after that. It couldn't. But through it all, I learned to listen to myself, to acknowledge my feelings without guilt or shame. I couldn't predict what lay ahead, but I could be honest with myself, and that was enough. Michael and I still loved each other. Our bond remained strong, built on years of shared moments. But I also realized that love doesn't have to fit one mold. It can shift, evolve, and still carry the weight of respect, even when things don't unfold as expected. And Alan, he's still part of my life, but now there's peace between us. We've both moved forward, each on our own path, forever changed by the truth we faced. Sometimes life demands vulnerability, asking us to confront things we're not ready for. But in the end, honesty is the only way forward. And with that, I found a freedom I hadn't known was possible.